Phil Robinson?
Uh-uh.
Did you ever know E.J. Lewis?
E.J. Lewis. Don't think so. Don't think so. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. We'll get going again so we can finish. Okay. So what we build our strategies on now for land improvement are centered around building our soil organic matter and our soil microbial populations. That's our number one goal. What we have found is that if we achieve that goal, we achieve every other goal we want. Okay? And we do that through building plant species diversity, utilizing livestock impact. All right? So, I want diversity in my pastures now. I'm to the point now that I abhor a monoculture. Okay? I do not want a monoculture in my pastures at all. I want polycultures. And as many species as I can cram in there is what I want. Okay? And I want to yes, sir.
I don't mean to cut you off here.
No.
Let's say you have land and somebody put a lot of pine trees, and that has been on the land for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you introduce diversity into that environment?
Okay? It's in the latent seed bank. It'll be there. Okay, it'll be there. Now you can go in initially, and if you want to plant some cocktail mixes and so forth to stimulate soil activity and soil building, you can do that, and we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about real life examples where we have just taken land similar to that and using simply livestock impact and the latent seed bank. Okay, rebuilding.
Latent seed?
Yeah, latent seed bank.
What's the last one?
Seed bank.
Seed bank.
Bank, B-A-N-K. That's my South Carolina accent, right? Nah. But yes. Seed bank. Yeah, and seed, S-E-E-D. Yeah. There are many seeds, plant seeds in the soil that have existed literally for thousands of years. You know, if you look at it, archaeologists have uncovered seed that they've been able to germinate. Okay? And we're talking about many thousands of years old seed. We have many different varieties of plants in our soils in that latent seed bank, but without proper impact and grazing management, we never tap into it. Okay? And we never realize it's even there. So again, it's all about diversity. Okay? That's critical. Diversity is critical. I want a good mix of grasses, legumes, and forbs in my pastures. All of those. Multiple species of each. Okay? Multiple species of each. Here's the deal. If you look to the far left of this slide, now, in forage agriculture, what we have done is gravitated towards planting monocultures, right? You know, we have said plant this hybrid variety of Bermuda grass. Plant just fescue, max-Q or whatever. Plant just ryegrass. Plant just bahia. Plant just this or that, right? And that's what our universities have been advocating, right? And you know what? I was there at one point, and I was bad wrong. Okay? I was wrong. When we plant a monoculture, that's what we get. We have producers now, livestock producers, that think the way a pasture should look is it should look like a lawn. No. Okay? You know, we have producers that think that it should be all the same, you know, in height, in appearance and everything, rather than having different height. They think it looks ragged. to have multiple species in there. Well, that's what I want now. And I think that's beautiful now. I've reoriented my concept of what a beautiful pasture looks like now. And when I see those lawn-looking pastures, I think, ooh, they got to have a lot of high inputs to keep their livestock going year-round, okay? When you have a monoculture, you have the same root structure below the ground that's reflected in the plant growing above the ground. Yes, sir?
I have to ask you just straight out. So
Yep.
are you saying a diverse and not monoculture, but a diverse ground or crops is economically better and there's less inputs? Is that
I am saying exactly that, and I'm getting ready to prove it to you. Okay? Yes. But yes, that is precisely what I'm saying. 20 years ago when I was teaching at the university, I would have said the exact opposite. Okay? I taught that. I promoted that. This is what I know now. See, you also got to, I farm and ranch myself, you know.
if you have less expenditure in the inputs?
Yeah, exactly. But you also have much better soil performance and plant performance and animal performance. So it's exponential, the benefits that you get, okay? They're not one-dimensional. Now look here, compared when you have a diversity of plant species, you see what you have above the ground, differences in height, structure, right? Okay, you have different canopies and all of that, okay? But what do you see below the ground? The same thing. Exactly, the same darn thing, okay? Now, in the monoculture, when it turns dry, and it does for all of us at some point every year, right? What happens to the monoculture? Right, it shuts down, it turns brown. It can't help but do that. Look at the darn root structure on it. It's pretty pathetic. But when you have a polyculture, it survives the drought and it can even thrive during those droughty periods and periods of flood, okay? Now, we want our livestock to do the work for us, okay? They are a tool for us. We often fall into the trap of becoming employees of our livestock, okay? Rather than our livestock being our employees, okay? So we have to make them do the job that we want them to do. One of the things that requires is constant observation. Okay, we have lost this. We have got, and I did too. I got to the point where, you know, all summer long we were cutting, raking, and baling and putting up hay. And that's what we paid attention to. That's what our whole focus was on. How much hay can we get put up? How much hay can we get put up? You know? And then in the wintertime, what did I do? I spent every daylight hour in the winter feeding the darn hay back. And I was so concerned and consumed with getting the hay put out and getting every group of cattle fed that I never paid attention to the pastures, to the soil, or to the cattle even. I was just wanting to get all the hay put out before dark caught me every day, okay? What a sad life, okay? And it really is. I enjoy life so much more today because I'm not doing any of that anymore. I'm paying attention to the cattle, the soil, and the grass. So observation is important. Where do the majority of our soil microbes live and function? Okay? Look, that's where, in the root system. So if we don't have diversity and complexity in the root system, we don't have diversity and complexity in our soil microbial population, and we don't have it above the ground. Remember, whatever is above the ground is reflected below the ground. Whatever is below the ground is reflected above the ground, okay? So that's a critical concept. So let's look at proper grazing of our pastures, and this goes for every species of livestock, okay? It doesn't matter whether they're beef cattle, dairy cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, doesn't matter, okay? The exact same principles apply. So one of the first concepts you have to remember is that recovery of your forages from grazing impact is very, very important. All right, this is an actual ranch out in West Texas that we've been working with. And this is the design of a planned multi-paddock grazing system that we implemented on that ranch. The dotted lines are the fences, and they can be even temporary single-strand polywire fences. We don't have to have that many permanent fences. I used miles of single-strand polywire and pigtail tread-in post. Very easy to do, okay? The little round blue spots are our water sources, that kind of thing. But let's look at the history of this ranch. Oh! This is a very bad idea. Do not do this at home, okay? That's your cousin? Let me guess, he has no kids, right? Okay. Now, on this ranch, the cows were GPS collared and tracked for a year. Okay? This rancher grazed conventionally. The cattle were basically allowed to roam the ranch, okay, unimpeded. All right? The green fluorescent spots are the areas that the cattle frequented as monitored by GPS throughout the year. So what we found after a year, that was out of the total acreage of this ranch, only 39% of the area was actually grazed by the cattle. Okay? 41% of the total GPS points were on only 9% of the total acreage of that ranch throughout that year. His stocking rate at that point was 21 acres per cow. Now it's 9 acres per cow after we implemented the new grazing methodology. Okay? This was the grazing pattern of those cows from April through October. Look at the number of areas they didn't even go to at all on that ranch. That's all the white. Okay? This was the grazing pattern November to March on that ranch. Okay? This is the same ranch overlaid with the new grazing design. Okay, for more forcing the cattle to use the entire ranch, to use every acre. Okay? That ranch is now 400 times more productive. 400 times. Through just doing this. Okay? Pretty simple. By the way, we added, see, that was his only water source, by the way. Okay? So by adding more water sources centrally located and all of that, now the ranch is much, much more effective. Okay, this is work done at the Noble Foundation in Oklahoma. And basically this is showing that by using multi-paddock rotational grazing from 1988 to 1997, they've been able to increase animal unit days 4 times. Okay? The importance of ground cover. Never graze so much in an individual pasture before you move them on that you expose bare ground. The importance of ground cover existing at all times is critical. This is soil loss per acre over here in tons per acre. This is the percent rainwater runoff over here. You want the green bar and the yellow bar to be as close to that middle bar as possible. The more they extend to either side, the more soil loss you're experiencing, the more water runoff you're experiencing. If we have 95% of our ground covered by forages, covered, no bare ground, only 5% bare ground, you can see we have no soil loss and only about 20% rainwater runoff. Okay? When we have 25% of our ground exposed in those pastures, now look what happens. We're getting close to a ton loss of soil per acre per year, and our runoff is all the way out close to 60%. When we have 50% of our ground exposed, wow, we're losing both ways, aren't we? Okay? This, if you remember nothing else from today, remember this, okay? When you graze, never, ever, ever let your livestock, any species of livestock, never let them consume more than 50% of the leaf volume of your plants before you rotate them to the next pasture. Here's why. You can consume up to 50% and you only get a 2 to 4% root growth stoppage. When you jump just another 10%, from 50 to 60, now all of a sudden you have 50% root growth stoppage. And then when you go above that, look, you can get up to 100% root growth stoppage, folks. Okay? That's not what you want at all. Yes, sir?
Define root growth.
That means the roots literally stop growing and they actually shrink up. They die and shrink up towards the soil surface. And I'll show you some diagrams of that in the next slide.
Well, the reason I ask that question is, in the past, I've read things where you let them eat a certain amount and it forces the plant to kill off certain roots to take those nutrients to grow the top back. And that killing off of those roots increases your soil microbes and earthworms. And
that will occur naturally, just like our hair and our nails.
Do what?
That will occur naturally, just like our hair and our nails. See what I'm saying? Okay. So, but if you allow them, now, this provides multiple grazings per season, okay, as well. Okay. So you're coming in, you're taking off, getting off, because if you don't, well, and you see it here, okay, you see the significant loss of root if you graze down too far, okay? All right, but here it's the same way, okay? If you graze down, if you closely crop graze, then look what happens to the root structure, okay? It shrinks up towards the soil surface, right?
Okay.
Now, if you turn dry, what happens?
You turn what?
If you turn dry during that period, what happens? Okay, the plant dies, right? Because it can't reach down to the moisture deeper in the soil anymore, because it no longer has root structure down that far. But also, again, where do the microbes live? In the roots. So if you shrink the total root area, what happens to the microbes? They die. Okay, they die. Okay, so now you've not only lost roots, but you've lost microbes. So it's a double whammy. Okay, and as your roots start to slowly grow back, your microbial population has to rebuild itself. So you have a period of time there where you have very little microbial functioning, okay, and cycling of nutrients. So what do you have to rely on in organic fertilizer applications or some other type of fertilizer application?
So, question.
Yes, sir.
So by that rationale, that you want to graze as close to that 50% as you can without going over, so the roots continue to grow. But, you know, like he said earlier, when the animal eats, however much the grass the animal eats, that's how much the roots die, which then releases trace nutrients back into the soil. So is the idea to graze as close as you can, or just graze it 30%, 40%, and move it on to the next?
Okay, first of all, remember how this works. What do the soil bacteria do? They consume those nutrients, right? Okay, so if you significantly reduce root mass in the soil and root depth, you've killed off a lot of bacteria, okay? And so now, you know, you have significantly fewer nutrients available, okay? But you need the protozoa, remember we talked about the predator population, to consume them to release the nutrients.
Okay.
Okay? And again, the protozoa don't exist if the root structure doesn't exist. It's all symbiotic or synergistic. Okay? Yes, sir.
Are there tools or techniques for estimating your percent of leaf volume that's been grazed?
Well, it's mostly observational, you know, but what we do is we go out and well, I do it eyeball now, okay, but you can train yourself. NRCS has a grazing stick, right? And you can take the grazing sticks and you can measure the height of your forages in each pasture, the average height. And you can then estimate density, and that grazing stick also has a chart on it that helps you estimate density of your stand, okay? And your NRCS personnel can teach you very easily how to use those, but they're a very simple tool to use. And just for ease of calculation, let's say your average stand height is 10 inches and you have a dense stand. So you would have approximately 300 pounds of forage dry matter available per inch. So if it's 10 inches tall, you've got 3,000 pounds of available dry matter per acre, okay? Now, if my animals in there are, again, for ease of math, let's say they're averaging 1,000 pounds apiece. They're going to need to consume 30 pounds, or 3% of their body weight, 30 pounds of forage dry matter per every 24-hour period per day, okay? So if I have 3,000 pounds available per acre, but I only want to consume 50% of that, okay, during that grazing, so I really have what? 1,500 pounds available that I want to take. So I take 1,500, divide it by 30, and how many head will that 1 acre support for that one day? Okay, was it 60? It's 60 something, but isn't it? Or no, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry.
It's 50, isn't it?
Yeah. 15. I was thinking about another illustration. It's 1,500 divided by 30. Okay, so yes, 50 head. Each acre support 50 head per 24-hour period, right?
Then you have to move them?
Yeah. Or if you're not moving them every day, then you've got to figure, if I'm going to move them every 3 days, I got to give that 50 head 3 acres to not go over that 50% consumption, okay? But the more frequent, and we'll talk about this, the more frequent you can move, the better, okay? All right, here's just another example. Here's examples in different parts of the country on recovery periods, okay? In wetter tallgrass areas of the U.S. where we get 30 plus inches of rain or better, our recovery period per pasture is typically 45 to 90 days. 90 when it's drier, 45 when it's wetter. In mixed grass prairie, 18 to 25 inches of rain annually. Our recovery in our forages is somewhere between 50 and 120 days. In short grass prairie, 90 to 150. And in arid regions where we have less than 15 inches of rain, we need a full growing season, or typically a full year for recovery, before we go back and graze that same area again, okay? So that's the general rule of thumb. This is the difference between what we call high density grazing and a light continuous graze, okay? In the light continuous graze, they're highly selective. They overgraze areas and severely undergraze other areas, and it's very patchy, okay? In a high density graze, look at the difference, okay? Very, very different.
That's some smut grass I see there?
That's Roots Edge.
That's Roots Edge?
Yeah,
We're going to talk about smut grass today?
we can.
I'm looking for a way to market it.
To market it? Okay, manure distribution. The more frequently we rotate, the more evenly our manure and urine from our livestock is deposited over the entire farm or ranch, okay? If we have continuous grazing where they just can go wherever they want, whenever they want, it takes 27 years to build 1 pile of manure per every square yard of your pasture, okay? If you rotate every 2 days, it only takes 2 years to achieve that same goal, okay? So the more frequently we rotate, the closer we get to that.
Why you have question marks for one time?
Well, I just mean that for the more frequently we move. For instance, if I move more than once a day, okay, and that kind of thing.
I went
Yeah.
to a seminar one time, and it was in Louisiana. I think it was put on by NRCS. And some of the guys there said, every time you make the house stop eating, sit down, they move again. They never let them sit down, they never let them eat. They just don't let them get to sleep at night. They make them move their cows every time during the day when they stop and sit down. You ever heard of that?
No,
I never have either. It's the only time I've ever heard of it.
I hadn't heard
The
that.
next question was, how long does it take doing it that way?
Okay, adaptive high stock density grazing. This is a tool that we use quite frequently now, and it's been highly, highly successful in every environment, whether we're talking about desert environments, very arid and brittle or fragile environments, or in environments like ours that are much wetter, okay? This is an example of 250,000 pounds per acre in stock density. This is 150,000 pounds per acre. This is 500,000 pounds per acre. That's 1,000,000 pounds per acre. Okay? So that's what we can achieve. The soil building properties at these kinds of densities are unbelievable.
How big is it? You can't see the wire on the other two sides.
Now that's 1,000 head of cattle there.
In the area perfectly square.
It's a rectangle.
I think they got some manure on the ground the next day after that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the point. Manure and trample. You got a lot of ground litter on the ground, and you got a lot of manure and urine on the ground. That requires, though, multiple moves a day. When you're at that level, you have to move 12 times a day. Okay? Now, you wouldn't want to do that year-round. But here's what we do. For specifically using the cattle as a tool in a very limited time of year to rapidly build soil organic matter, soil fertility, and microbial populations, we use these, what we call ultra-high stock densities, once or twice a year, okay? And then we can relax back a little bit. Now, I make moves every day on our farm, but then once a year, I go to these ultra-high stock densities and make multiple moves a day. I'm not able to cover the whole farm every year, but I don't have to.
You just make it fast as you pass the form and stop, or
Here,
you make one round? Or how many rounds?
what I do is I target a specific area of the farm every year that I want to especially improve, okay? Here's the strategy to doing this. First of all, you want your ground relatively dry. Don't do it during a wet period, or they'll muck it up, plow it up, whatever you want to call it, okay? It'll be a mud hole, all right? So do this at these stock densities during a dry period, okay, when the ground will hold up, all right? Let whatever area you're going to target to do this in, let the grass get mature and grow up. You want it high. We call it tall grazing, okay? Don't do this on short pasture, okay? Let it get up. And one of the purposes of that is that you want as much total forage biomass there as possible, both for them to consume and trample. The trample is new organic matter, okay? It's brand new organic matter. So you want a high degree of trample as well as a lot of manure and urine application, okay? You can build 1% organic matter per year doing this, 1% a year, okay? And we've documented that over and over and over. Yes?
Do you ever run poultry or anything behind it to see?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can run pigs and poultry behind them. In this situation, they'll take advantage of the manure piles and all of that, okay?
The pigs will eat cow manure.
Absolutely they will. They love it, yeah. And chickens will scratch through it and, you know, and all of that and spread it out. Now, on this, we'll move about 12 times a day during daylight hours. Okay, so every hour. Yeah, every hour in the summertime, we'll have 12 hours of daylight or so. Move them every hour. Okay, boom, 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 boom. Give them big enough paddocks to support each hour. Okay, but to achieve the stock densities. I can do it with anything I want to do with it, but I'm only doing it a short period of time. So I'm not worried about their performance because I'm only doing it a very short. They become a tool for me at this point. Okay, a tool. Okay. You what?
After you did it for just that 1 hour, what's your recovery time until you did it again with that huge stopping density? The next day? Or?
No, here's what we do. Okay. So we build all the paddocks we need for that day. And then every hour, we take down the strand in front of them, just roll it up on your geared reel. They move themselves into the next paddock, and then you just keep doing that. Don't worry about a back fence, okay? Start it from your water source out, and don't worry about a back fence. At these densities, they have soiled and trampled that ground so much, they're not going to back graze, okay? They have zero interest in back grazing. Okay, so you don't have to worry about back fences. As a matter of fact, you don't have to worry about back fences for the entire week. All right, you can do this 5 days in a row, 6 days in a row, 7 days in a row, and that's generally about as long as we do it at these high densities. I pick about 1 week a year because you got to live with them, during that time period. But it's well worth it.
What's the least
Well
amount
worth
of
it.
cattle you can use?
Oh, you can use about anything you have, but it just means that
This paddock
you may have them on 1/10 of an acre.
Right.
Each paddock is 1/10 of an acre or less. Right. It's the pounds per acre impact that's important, okay? Not the number of head, but it's the pounds per acre impact. So to get that, no matter how many head you have, you just keep concentrating them down, 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 down in terms of that area you give them. And then just moving forward, moving forward, moving forward, okay? So, again, this is something that works very well. Again, they move themselves, okay? There's no issue here. You don't have to yeehaw them or drive them or anything else. They're going to automatically move themselves into the next paddock. This is how easily handled they become. This is... we were moving this herd, we call this our red herd, and we were moving them from one side of this farm to the other, and this is here in Mississippi. That's up at Prairie, Johnny. But anyway, we were, I had them grazing over on the east end of the farm, okay, that direction. And I grazed them, over on that end, and then I wanted to move them all the way to the west end and have them move back towards that direction, okay? So that was a 2-mile move, all right, a 2-mile move. I had them, they followed my Ranger all the way, that 2 miles. They came across a lot of fresh ground, ungrazed ground. They never once put their heads down and stopped. Once they get used to this, they trust that wherever you're taking them, it's much better than where they've been or where they are right then. And they'll keep following you, okay? They never once stopped. They followed me all the way those 2 miles till we finally got to the gap gate there, and I let them into the paddock I wanted to start them back in, okay? That's how easy they become. When you want to get them up to work them, it's very easy. Get on my Ranger, I build a single strand, unelectrified polywire catch pin, lead them right into it with the Ranger, shut them up in it outside of my corral, and then it's very easy to get them into the corral, okay? So you only need one person to get them up. I don't want anybody else unless they're going to ride on the Ranger with me. I don't want anybody fooling with them, and messing things up. So one person can easily handle them. Yes?
Back to the picture before, we had 1 million of them in the corner.
Yeah.
You have to go back to it. When you finish with that, do you bush hog or anything?
No. You won't need to bush hog. You won't need to bush hog. No, bad idea. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. Yeah,
It won't be
don't
very
do
good.
that. I'm going to show you some other pictures about how trample should look. Don't bush hog. Don't bush hog.
Are they trained to the fence?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You don't have to electrify it or?
Well, now I keep the paddocks electrified, but when I'm using it temporarily like a catch pen, they're not going to test it. They're so used to this, you know, that, and if this goes out a day or two, I don't worry about it. You know, they're not going to bother it. But you still, you know, you don't want to test it too long, you know, so, and it doesn't take a lot of juice. 5 kilovolts will work just fine on these trained livestock, okay, without any problem. I usually try to maintain it somewhere between 5 and 9 kilovolts, and we're good to go. If you get much hotter than that, then the truth is your polywire life will decrease, because you'll actually start burning up your polywire, okay? So you don't want it real hot, all right? But 5 to 9 kilovolts, and you're pretty good to go. All right, here's some case studies of, I wanted to show y'all some things on places that we've worked at. We talked about Gabe Brown earlier, okay? In 1991, Gabe purchased the farm that he's on now. It had been heavily tilled for decades, and this is up in the northern Great Plains, so it used to be native tall grass prairie. He farmed very conventionally, just like everybody else. Row crops, corn, beans, wheat, all of that, and some cattle. His soil organic matter at that time was 1.7 to 1.9%. That's pathetic for that part of the country. Remember, this is northern Great Plains. It originally was double-digit organic matter. Okay, that's what farming did to it. It knocked it below 2%. Water infiltration rates were only a ½ inch per hour. Okay, by contrast, on the native rangelands in that area, they averaged 7% organic matter, which was not good anymore, but still significantly better, and 6 inches per hour water infiltration rate.